Controversial elections in Kogi State, less so in Bayelsa, but still disputed there. Both states split down the middle, turning them into vicious, violent, chaotic enclaves for the last few days. Insecurity, corruption, and intimidation, big problems. And looking ahead to the 2023 presidential poll, it's never been more important to start now to work towards a significant and fundamental reform of Nigeria's voting process. Now, imagine if you could vote from the comfort of your own home through a digitalized electoral system where voting is safe and secure and where your vote will most definitely count. Well, today, in the wake of those flawed elections in Kogi and Bayelsa states, a major conference has been taking place in Abuja called the Digital Voting Summit. It's brought together members of the National Assembly, the Electoral Commission, international donor agencies, and civil society organizations to discuss technologies suitable for the safe and secure conduct of the 2023 presidential elections. Well, in a moment, we'll speak to the organizers of that conference. But first, here's a short video that illustrates the idea behind the digital voting system.
Is the current electoral process in Nigeria the best one? Or could it be more transparent? Have you ever been restricted from voting because you registered in Lagos, but at the time you were in Kano? Or is it a financial strain organizing trips to Nigeria so that you can vote? Imagine casting a vote in the comfort and safety of your home. Imagine a transparent electoral process where every vote is reflected in real time for the nation to see. Blockchain voting makes it all possible. During elections, there's a central authority that records, counts, and checks all of the votes. With blockchain voting, the process is decentralized, so everyone can hold a copy of the full voting record on their own devices. The data is encrypted to protect the identity of individual voters. Illegitimate votes cannot be added because everyone holds a record and can check that all the votes comply with the rules. With blockchain voting, you can vote directly and from anywhere. It eliminates ballot theft, ballot destruction, election manipulation, and political violence, just to name a few. To vote, just log on to the blockchain voting platform using a secret identity code. Select your candidate and the results will be displayed soon after. Choose Restore Niger's blockchain voting process as your solution to rebuilding the nation. The future is now.
Sounds desperately hopeful, doesn't it? Well, to tell us more about this digital voting system, I'm joined now in the studio by the co-founder of Restore Nigeria and executive director of Digital Good Governance for Africa, Christian Elemele, who is one of the organizers of the Digital Voting Summit, and by Leonardo Gamar, CEO of the Agora Vote, the company that did a pilot of blockchain voting in Sierra Leone. Thank you for joining us, both of you. And you had your conference today, so we appreciate your taking the time. I think it's still actually going on, is it?
It just ended.
It just ended, so thanks for coming in. But let's first of all talk to you about your impressions of the Kogi and Bayelsa governorship elections that have just concluded, because I am assuming that it strengthens your conviction that elections in Nigeria are dysfunctional, they're corrupt, and they're not free and fair.
Yes, I totally agree. I mean, this initiative was born because of the dysfunctionality of the electoral process in Nigeria. And luckily or funny, we put actually this summit at this time because we knew it will end up like this. So the discussion, the conversation can really take momentum. And when we started this initiative last year, in November, we were actually looking towards the 2019 general elections, knowing that it will be very violent, it will be very manipulative, and it will be basically a charade. And exactly that happened. And we worked on this initiative, mapped out a strategy, milestones, and had this summit today, which was very well received by the donor funding agencies, civil society, and the people of Nigeria.
And the conduct of these elections did not come as a surprise, based on what you've experienced. I suppose the question must be, Mr. Gamar, how can we change that? I mean, that's what your digital voting summit was all about, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's true, yeah. Basically, the idea is to kind of give the power to the voters, because at the end of the day, an election is a very crowd participatory project, where, you know, the people who vote have to have access to their votes, have to track them, have to be able to make sure that their votes were transported the ballots were transported the right way, the tallying happened the right way, and the votes were really counted the right way. So there are several ways of doing this. Blockchain technology is an industry, and the way we do things at Agora is, instead of building one app, you know, on your phone, for example, or on your pad or on your computer, we built some sort of iOS, like the iOS of your iPhone, on top of which you can build as many decentralized apps as you want. So it's a platform that works with a consensus mechanism, meaning an algorithm that uploads the information to the blockchain, but the one who are actually uploading the information to the blockchain are servers, different servers.
Right.
And these servers are running, they can be running in the University of Lagos, they can be running at the headquarters of the political party A, headquarters of political party B, why not the Red Cross, why not Amnesty International, why not Médecins Sans Frontières? So instead of having one centralized entity, some sort of black box that decides of the outcome or kind of controls the outcome, here we have all these servers working
and they're all
together.
monitoring that
Exactly.
the ballot, right? That sounds very, very interesting. But I'm going to ask you this, because the question will always be the so-called cryptographic procedures for blockchain e-voting. I mean, how is this going to be different from the ones in voting machines, for example? And other types of e-voting? What would be the advantage of this blockchain e-voting technology over the rest that are already in use?
Well, I think that's actually,
Okay, let's say you have your notebook.
You're the whiz kid.
he's a whiz kid.
He's the businessman.
Well,
no, I'm just kidding. I don't mean it that
Not
way.
really. I mean, Restore Niger is an initiative which needs to bring the people together, like a singularity.
So you're mobilizing the people to become aware of this and put pressure on their government. And that's an absolutely critical function. Because at the moment it doesn't look as if that is anywhere near being put into place. But let's hear the technology side of it first.
Basically, let's say the three of us have 3 notebooks.
Right.
Okay. And let's say a fourth person comes to us and says, okay, guys, 1 + 1 equals to 2. So if the 3 of us agree that 1 + 1 equals to 2, we will write it on our notebooks. And if I write it, it will be written in yours and in yours in the same time. Okay, let's say now someone comes and says, okay, Leo, just to me, Leo, you have to write on your notebook that 1 + 1 equals to 3. He hacked me. So he's writing with my hand, 1 + 1 equal to 3. You guys will see it, and you'll be, no, this is not true.
So you raise a red flag
Exactly.
immediately.
So you put me on quarantine, and you guys will decide whether I've been hacked or not. So it's some sort of democracy. It's a digital democracy run by servers. So instead of having one black box, again, that decides of the outcome, here it's the entire, it can be the civil society, NGOs, it can be even UN organization. Your observers, the African Union that comes to observe in the polling station, actually they don't need to come anymore. They just need to check the servers, and they can check how things are going. So that's the main issue. And in cryptography, for a very, very long time, we thought that the cleverer is the code, the smarter is the code, the more protected we will be, which is true. But one day you will find someone who's smarter, who will outsmart us, and will be able to find discrepancy in what we wrote. So the way we look at things now in the 21st century is the more we make things public, the more it's difficult to hack them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting point, and that's where you come in, obviously, because part of the problem that you face in trying to mobilize, because I mean, you're not just talking about mobilizing the ordinary Nigerian. I mean, they've never had a history of just being open to that kind of mobilization. I mean, you'd have to get the National Assembly in, the governments, the Independent Electoral Commission, and so on. And the problem, some people would argue, is that politicians don't want the system to change. They want to be able to manipulate it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's obvious, having watched the elections in Bayelsa and Kogi State, that probably a big part of the politicians in government right now do not want the system to change because it's benefiting them. And then apart from that, there's an entire ecosystem of corruption in the entire electoral process where so many stakeholders benefit from. So what needs to happen is that a critical mass needs to be awakened. And we can already see it in Nigeria that there is an awakening, a new consciousness.
Certainly there is an awareness that the elections are not going right, and that the people are not exercising their right to choose their leaders.
Exactly. I mean, we can see that voter turnout is always extremely low, and it's not going to change. And the idea of having blockchain election is really, I think, the best thing about blockchain is that it's transparent and it's inclusive. It will bring elections closer to the electorate in Nigeria, because if you look at Nigeria, Big Brother elections, how many votes were counted, young people are majority on social media. They're on their phones day and night. So if that's the case, and you know the voter turnout is low and they make up 60% of the electorate, why not bring election closer to them? And I think in any democracy, looking at Nigeria as being the largest economy in Africa, it should aim to also become the largest democracy on the continent.
It's pretty obvious that a faulty, chaotic, and corrupt electoral system inevitably produces a leadership that is not representative of the wishes of the voting public. And for many years, disappointingly, this has been the case in Nigerian elections. So, in order to restore confidence in the electoral system and strengthen this country's democracy, a fundamental reform of the voting process is key. That's what a major digital summit taking place in Abuja has set out to discuss. It's been talking about the possibility of using a form of blockchain voting to get around the current problems of violence, ballot box snatching, and voter intimidation. So, how is it going to work? Well, in a moment, we'll continue our chat with two of the organizers of that digital voting summit. But first, let's dip into that conference to hear some of what's been said there.
New ideas are clearly needed. The use of blockchain strikes me as one of the most democratic ways you can keep data and run elections. And if we can demonstrate the technological and creates trust amongst the voters, will definitely be part of the way to creating some of these solutions. But I think probably the most important task is to find ways to convince the political elite to use this technology. Of course, there are vested interests in keeping the things exactly the way they are. And we know turkeys don't vote for Christmas. But I think actually after this event, the grassroots campaign that follows is the chance to build a movement of people, of business, CSOs, wider civil society and the diaspora as well, to try and shift the political consensus and move the status quo so that we can use technologies such as blockchain to bring true voting to the people of Nigeria.
Digital democracy, there's an opportunity for Nigerians to be able to, for us to increase voter participation in elections, increase the engagement of young people and all Nigerians in the political process, and at the same time open up the political landscape for new ideas. And this is what's really bringing us here today, is the idea that through fairer, freer, safer and more inclusive elections.
And still with me in the studio, the co-founder of Restore Nigeria and executive director of Digital Good Governance for Africa, Christian Elemele, who is one of the organizers of that digital voting summit, and Leonardo Gamar, CEO of the Agora Vote, the company that did a pilot of blockchain voting in Sierra Leone. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us. And I'll come to you, because we're talking to him when we went on break. You've had... You've tested this. There are examples of where this blockchain technology has been applied to the voting systems of countries. Tell us about that.
Basically, what you have to keep in mind, and this is one key point that all Nigerians have to keep in mind, is that we don't come with one solution, and we try to have that solution being used, no matter what. So if I come to you and I say, okay, you guys will be voting in 4 years from your phones, you will be laughing at me. You'll be, listen, Leo, you're Swiss, you're, very nice guy, but you guys have 4G all over. We're a much bigger country. We don't have internet everywhere. We have a rate of illiteracy that you guys don't have. So there are ways where we can, make things happen step by step, easily, also without necessarily changing the laws and spending too much time, because I am a technical guy. It's not in my best interest to spend, months lobbying in the parliament, spending money of my own business, so there are different ways of doing it. One of the ways could be simply tracking the ballots, so keeping the exact same system that you guys have.
Yeah, but you tested it in Sierra Leone.
Exactly. So
what did you do in Sierra Leone, and what was the outcome of what you did?
In Sierra Leone, it was a double count.
Right.
Where basically the ballots were double counted in the blockchain, and we gave the results basically half an hour or an hour after the end of the election day. Whereas the NEC, the National Electoral Commission, gave the result of the first round with 0.02%, I think, difference over 3 weeks later. So you can imagine all the stress, that the Sierra Leonean went through these 3 weeks. And very sadly, I'm very sad to say this, but I have to say it, people died during these 3 weeks because of questionable results. So if we can have a way to make sure that people understand that their votes will be recorded safely, people will, make the queue in a more chill way, and will wait for the result less longer.
But you're more. I mean, from what I understand, the whole point of this is to free people up to be able to vote in their spare time, for example.
Exactly. Yeah.
Use their mobile phones, but what about physically challenged people who are blind, people who are illiterate? What's that going to mean for them? And I'll put that question to you.
That will mean to them that they will be part of the electoral process, because as it is now, I don't want to imagine being in a wheelchair without legs in Nigeria. Life is horrible. Not speaking of going to an election in an overcrowded place, long queues, staying 5 hours under the sun. Sometimes votes don't even take place because of violence breaking out. So it's needed. It's needed for democracy. And democracy is not just at risk in Nigeria, it's at risk everywhere in the world. There has been a massive decline in voter turnout everywhere. I mean, we're seeing it in Britain, we're seeing it in Germany, we're seeing it everywhere. So blockchain, what we hope at Restore Niger and DIGA is that implementing this in Nigeria taking the step forward as the largest economy in Africa, and maybe an example for the world of how democracy could actually look like.
It could be a revolution. Whoops, I've used the word. I've used the word but I mean, just going forward with this, you've also got people who don't have smartphones, or don't have phones at all. So you'd still need polling stations for people like that, wouldn't you?
Not necessarily. It only depends on the infrastructure of the country and the capabilities of the country to offer good, or I would say medium good infrastructure. If you're blind or if you don't read, the INEC could have an official translator translating in your mother language the text that is written on the phone, on the screen of the phone. So you would have a headset and someone basically telling you, so the three candidates are Mr. B, Mrs. C, and Mr. D. If you want to vote for Mr. A, click now. You have 5 seconds to click. You don't need to even speak English or to go to school for that.
Yeah, but all that sounds, because obviously you have to adapt the thing, don't you, to different circumstances. It just sounds expensive.
No, it's actually cheaper, because you don't spend money to. I think Nigeria is the most expensive election in Africa. You guys spend half of your budget in security, like deploying the army, deploying the police, securing, the election day, the days before, the day after. And if you don't spend that money, it's a very cynical game, because if you don't spend that money, you really literally put yourself in front of maybe a civil war. So you have to spend that money, and that's so much money. And deploying the paper ballots, moving them, renting offices, paying people extra hours on Sundays, all that is super, super expensive. So if you can have people voting remotely, that's less expensive. It's actually, we are here talking about 50 to 60 to 70% discount. It depends on the quality of the network that we can have. But we also have an app. You probably know, I don't want to advertise, but you probably know Shazam, right? It's an app that you can have on your phone that recognizes songs or tunes, right? So that app can work completely offline. Let's say there's a tune, you're with your friends, but you're like in an underground London club, and you don't have network. So you press on your phone, Shazam will recognize the song, and then the moment you have network, Shazam will tell you which song was that song. So basically it works like this.
So it's something
you don't
similar.
need internet.
Okay, we've got about 20 seconds left. Let me just bring you in. What's been the reaction so far? I presume you had people from the Electoral Commission and National Assembly and all that attending that summit today.
Yeah. Very enthusiastic, I think. Very positive reactions from all stakeholders, actually. And to be honest, actually also as a surprise. I mean, of course, there were critical questions, but
the so far positive reactions.
Very positive. I think the momentum's on the side of the people.
Okay, I'm going to thank the two of you very much indeed. Christian Elemele, who's one of the organizers of that digital voting summit, and Leonardo Gamar, who's one of the tech people who attended that summit. Thank you very much indeed. Well, that's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again for a fresh edition tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.